Hello, my friends, and welcome to Rick Reads. Today we'll be continuing The Demon with Chapter 13. Dante wandered through Manhattan's market, brushing past the many locals shopping for necessities. He noticed far more people around than before he went to the past. He had never seen the market so full outside of the harvest season. Some were familiar faces, faces he had seen on his numerous trips to the market, but others were foreign to him. He smiled at the thought of more lives being saved because of something he had done thousands of years ago, and yet some of these people had seen him not 2 days ago. As he walked, Dante looked at various items in the stalls. Some merchants were selling produce, others weapons to combat the many creatures that prowled the night. One vendor was trying unsuccessfully to sell items helpful for warding off vampires, werewolves, and other creatures that were once myth. The man was ancient, with a long white beard that reached his belt. He was laughed at or ignored by the many shoppers, mocked as a crazy man shouting about monsters. Dante walked up to the man's stall and picked up a sprig of wolfsbane. The plant had been dried and pressed, ready to be ground into a powder to mix with food, drink, building materials, or clothing. "You don't find a better wolfsbane for at least 100 miles, young man," the old man stated. His raspy, weathered voice croaked out with little confidence. "Oh, I have a bush of this in my garden at home, kind sir," Dante replied. "I live only a few miles out of town." The old man smiled, showing more gum than teeth, and those few teeth were rotted and black. "Smart boy you are," he rasped. "Not often I find someone so young who still believes. Not many alive now who remember the horrors visited upon us during the war." "Not many of us indeed," Dante smiled. He recognized the old man. This old man had once been a childhood friend. He was only a human, therefore not gifted with the slow aging of demons. "Older than I am and still not even looking like you're 30-something yet," the old man laughed. Dante patted him on the shoulder and grinned. "You've seen better days, Gerard. How's the family?" Gerard's smile softened a bit. My son died a few weeks ago. Got attacked by a wolf in the park. He was taking his daughter for a walk. Poor girl is in pieces." "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that," Dante sighed. "It's never easy losing a loved one." Gerard nodded. But enough sadness. What have you been up to since I saw you last month?" Dante smiled and shook his head. "Yeah, you wouldn't believe me." Gerard's face split into a wry smile. You met a girl." Dante's smile vanished. "I did, actually, but it didn't work out in the end." "Shame," Gerard muttered. "Hey, you know what? I got another granddaughter you might like. She's in town helping me out with my stock. You should meet her." "Oh, Gerard, you really shouldn't do that," Dante laughed. "It's awkward enough that she's related to you. I really don't want to call you Granddad." Gerard laughed, a wheezing sound that turned into a coughing fit. Don't you worry, boy. You will be long buried before I'm ever old enough to be your gramps." They shared a laugh at that, and Dante shook his head. "Oh, I'm also planning a trip, so romance isn't really a good idea." "Where are you going?" Dante shrugged. "Oh, nowhere in particular. Just want to see the world again." Gerard grinned his nearly toothless grin and shook his finger at Dante. You never tire of being abroad. Here's the thing, though. My granddaughter wants to see the world, too. You should take her along. I wouldn't trust anyone else with her safety." Dante had no idea what to say. He did not want anyone with him, especially someone he would have to keep a constant eye on. But he knew that Gerard never made a suggestion like this lightly. The old man was usually very cold and untrusting of others. The fact that he even trusted Dante was a testament to their long friendship. "Fine," Dante sighed. "I have a few preparations to make, so have her meet me at my home tomorrow. If she's not ready by noon tomorrow, I'm leaving her here." Gerard smiled and nodded. "I'll have her there, ready and willing." Dante nodded and bid the old man goodbye, going back to his shopping. He needed very little for this trip, as he usually went town to town and bought only what provisions he would need until he came across the next town. It was a much more time consuming way to travel, but it allowed him to learn more about the people and their towns along the way. He loved learning new things or seeing familiar things done in new ways. When Dante had his supplies, he went home to pack enough to last him until he reached Bethlehem, a small town more than 50 miles to the west in what was left of Pennsylvania. Along the way, he noticed a new set of footprints in the sand, traveling parallel to his own from earlier that day. They went toward his home, and Dante began to feel a burning anger in the pit of his stomach at the thought of an intruder. He raced along the beach, running toward his home. The tracks went right up to the buried submarine. When he reached the front door, he placed his sack of supplies on the ground and drew his sword. The enchanted obsidian blade seemed to suck in the light of the setting sun, causing the shadows around him to deepen. Dante placed his hand on the door handle and silently entered his home. The meager light in his home was just enough to illuminate the main room, showing nothing out of place. Dante crept through the living area and went into the kitchen. Everything seemed in order. He moved like a shadow throughout the ground floor and found no one. That left the lower levels. Dante slid through a small crawl space and wound his way downward toward the entrance to the lower level of his home. The crawl space had vents into each room and allowed Dante to look into them. He found nothing amiss. The only room left was his bedroom. The crawl space ended just outside the room, so Dante crept out of it and approached the door. The door was closed, not how Dante had left it in that morning when he left. Whoever was in his home was likely still in that room. Silent as a shadow, Dante turned the wheel on the door and unlocked it. The door swung open on oiled hinges by itself, revealing the room for Dante to see. Sitting in the chair near the dresser was a figure obscured by the dim light. "Who are you and why are you in my home?" Dante demanded. The figure stood, a shaft of light revealing his face. The sandy brown hair was parted down one side and cut short. The sparkling blue eyes held a smirk, and the man's face held an amused expression. "What?" Dante gasped, nearly dropping his sword in shock. "I killed you!" The intruder spread his hands and said, "I know, Dante, but I learned a neat little trick to avoid staying dead. It took me a very long time to find you, and I died a few more times along the way. But I finally found you. How the hell are you alive, Victor?" "Soul storage, you ignorant demon," Victor sneered. "I managed to figure out how to store my soul in an object. Then it's just a matter of waiting for some fool to pick it up so I can regenerate. Sure, it means someone else must die and have their soul taken to the afterlife. But when it means I get to hunt down a demon who is responsible for the deaths of so many innocent people, well, let's just say it's all worth it. Hell, I even got my angelic powers back. I'm once again a full-fledged angel." Dante felt his knees go weak. He had killed this angel in the distant past. How was it Victor could hold on to a grudge for so many centuries? And why was he here? Why now? "I take it you plan to kill me then?" Victor smiled. "Eventually. You see, I'm not actually standing in front of you. I came here earlier to examine the layout of your home. I left hours ago and cast a spell here to await you. This is a pre-recorded message, left for you to tell you that I am coming for you." "Then I suppose it doesn't matter what I say to you," Dante muttered, figuring the angel must have had some idea as to how the conversation would go. "Oh, you'll see me very soon, Dante." The image flickered and vanished, leaving Dante alone in his room. "Son of a bitch," Dante sighed. He was suddenly glad he was going on this trip. Facing Victor without the powers death had granted him would be a tough challenge. He may not be able to defeat the angel in combat alone. If it was strictly a battle of steel, Dante was sure he could win, but he knew Victor would use his own magical prowess to turn the tide of the battle. But Dante knew how to summon the abilities death had granted him. He had the knowledge of how the spells worked and how he could control them. All he needed to do now was practice with the knowledge he was left with, and he could eventually become as powerful as he was in the past. Besides, all Death had done was greatly amplify Dante's own innate demonic abilities. Even at 132 years old, Dante was considered a very young demon, and adding to the fact that he had never been to hell, which would have awoken his powers much sooner. Being born outside of hell granted him a more human appearance, but without the powerful energies of hell enhancing his magical abilities, he was left almost powerless in comparison to other demons. According to his father, Dante was the first demon born outside of hell, an anomaly and an enigma to other demons. Dante pushed Victor from his mind and focused on preparing for his journey. He planned on being abroad for over a year, so he would have to properly ward his home against further intrusion and the elements should the weather become violent. It was simple enough. He had hired a powerful demon decades ago to ward the place after he had finished furnishing it. The demon had put up powerful enchantments and protective spells that Dante could activate easily. All he had to do was touch an amulet the demon had left behind, and the wards would activate. He hid his few valuables in a chest, which he placed in a secret compartment inside the hull of the sub for safekeeping, then threw linen sheets over his furniture to avoid having to do as much dusting as possible when he came home. He shoved spare clothes into his traveling bag and gathered his weapons into one area so he could put each in its place before he left. By the time he could finally lie down, he was exhausted and fell asleep within seconds. Dante awoke to a knock on his door the next morning. He checked the clock on the wall and sighed. He had slept for nearly 10 hours, but it felt like he had been awake all night. The knocking grew louder, more insistent. "Oh, calm down," Dante growled. He crawled out of bed and slipped his long coat over his shirtless shoulders. He had fallen asleep before even taking off his pants, so he buckled his belt and made for the front door. Rubbing the sleep from his eyes, Dante opened the door, feeling nearly blinded by the morning sunlight. There stood a short young woman, perhaps only in her early 20s, wearing new-looking traveling clothes. She had a bulging pack slung over one shoulder, and she tossed her black hair in irritation at having been kept waiting for so long. Her gray eyes showed a lack of amusement at Dante's disheveled appearance. She was not unattractive, but she seemed rather plain for Dante's taste. She glared at him as he looked her up and down, trying to gauge what kind of person she was. Her feet were shoulder-width apart, with one hand on her hip, showing obvious impatience. The slight sneer looked somewhat unnatural on her face, telling Dante she was generally a relatively pleasant person. Her long hair was pulled back into a tight ponytail, without a single hair out of place, suggesting a professional attitude, and she wore no makeup, offering a feeling of confidence in her physical appearance. Her clothes were newer, with very little dust, and they fit somewhat snugly while still allowing full range of motion. The short sword at her hip was set at a slightly awkward angle, telling Dante that she may not wear it often, therefore she may not even be very well versed in its use. "You going to look me up and down like a piece of meat, or are you going to invite me in?" she asked, her impatience winning out over her courtesy. Dante almost laughed to himself. You're not exactly what I was expecting," he replied honestly. "Come on in. I still have to ready my things, so have a seat." She entered his home and sat on a stool near the kitchen. "What were you expecting?" Dante shrugged, closing the door. "Oh, some little girl fresh out of her parents' house looking for an adventure, I suppose? Plus, you're Gerard's granddaughter, so I don't know. Maybe someone a little more comfortable wearing a sword." She shifted on the stool as Dante walked past. Her hand absently brushed the hilt of her sword. "Well, not all of us have had your training," she quipped. Dante smiled and looked over his shoulder at her. "Nor have you lived by the sword nearly as long as I have, child." He withdrew into the lower levels of the submarine and tossed his coat over his chair. Dante took up his sword belt and buckled it in place, then pulled a shirt on. He reached into his closet and took out his armored vest, a relic from the war worn by his father. As he attached the clasps, he unconsciously ran his fingers over the thick threads he had used to stitch the hole left by the sword that had killed Nikolai. The vest fit a bit more snugly on him than it had his father, but the material was flexible. Ceramic plates, no more than a quarter of an inch thick, were layered between the liner and the hardened outer layer of the vest, offering moderate protection to the vital areas while still offering maximum movement. The black material blended in with his dark red shirt and black coat and pants. Fully dressed and with his sword at his side, Dante went back to the main room where Gerard's granddaughter still sat. By the way, Dante started, what should I call you? I'm Aaron, she replied. Dante, he muttered. I'm ready. Let's head out then. Might as well start while the sun's still out. He walked to the door and heard Aaron slip off the stool to follow. Opening the door, Dante motioned for her to go through first while he placed his hand on the hidden amulet on the wall behind the door. He felt the warmth of the magic in the amulet and sensed the powerful wards activating. The wards would remain active until either he died or he returned home and deactivated them, whichever came first. He walked outside, shut the door, and locked it. Turning around, he saw Aaron looking at him with a confused expression. What? He asked. Don't you lock your door when you leave? She rolled her eyes and asked, Where's your pack? If we're to travel the world, don't you think you'll need some supplies? Dante shook his head and motioned for them to start walking. Only if I plan on blazing my own trail, which I don't think anyone has done since, well, not for at least a millennia. No, I plan on stopping off in each town I come to. I'll rest and eat when I stop there and continue on my way with a few extra supplies to last me until I reach the next town. Aaron still looked a little confused, but seemed satisfied with the answer. I suppose I'm just not used to being around demons, she sighed. Oh, so your grandfather told you about me then? Aaron nodded. He's quite proud of his friendship with you. He says you two trained and traveled together. Yeah, we did, Dante nodded. So he's probably told you about how little I actually need to eat or sleep as compared to you humans. Again, Aaron nodded. I simply thought he was exaggerating, like he tends to do when he's telling his stories. Dante smiled at the thought of the old man and his endless tales. Some were so far-fetched that they had to be made up. If not for his own experiences, Dante would have written them off as simple tales made up to entertain a group. Seems he is always good for a story or two, he grinned. Aaron smiled at that, and the two walked on in silence for a time. They made their way out of the borders of old New York and pressed on for several hours, stopping to make camp for the night. Dante was feeling rejuvenated after walking all day and wanted to press on, but Aaron stopped him, telling him she needed rest even if he didn't. She was, after all, still just a human. That night, they sat at the small campfire. Aaron looked at the flames, mesmerized by their dance, while she ate some of her rations. Dante rested on a fallen log and stared at the stars in the sky, taking in the soft glow of the moonlight and the crackling of the flames. Dante rested on a fallen log and stared at the stars in the sky, taking in the soft glow of the moonlight and the crackling of the flames. I don't mean to seem intrusive, Aaron said, but I can't help wondering why you seem to be in such a hurry to leave this morning. Dante closed his eyes and breathed in the clean air, smelling a hint of pine coming from the nearby woods. Just felt it was time to see the world again. Last time I was out and about, the world was a very different place. Aaron thought about his answer and shook her head. But you seemed almost rushed to get out of there. Why? Dante gazed at the stars again and shrugged. Would she understand his motives? Not likely. She was only a child in comparison to him. I have enemies, he said at length. One of them found where I live. To be honest, I was fairly shocked to find out he's still alive. Also, I have no wish to face him again. I buried our dispute when I stopped his heart. He holds a grudge spanning millennia, and I feel it is in my best interest to avoid him at all costs. Is that why you're traveling? To run away from an old enemy? Dante shook his head in disappointment. She didn't understand. Then again, she didn't know the full story, so he forgave her for misunderstanding. No, I decided to go on this trip before he showed himself. I'm not running from him so much as I'm trying to avoid useless conflict. I'm not like the rest of my kind. I'm not some bloodthirsty demon bent on killing everyone I meet. I just want to live my quiet life. I'd like to someday meet a woman whom I can marry, start a family, and raise my children, all in the quiet comfort of my home. What use is fighting all the time if there's no actual reason for it? You say that, but the way you move is like water, Aaron replied. Every move I've seen you make today has been smooth and deliberate. You move with a warrior's passion, a dancer's grace. I've never seen anyone so perfect for wielding a sword before. I've been around warriors and soldiers all my life, Tante, and I have never seen someone so fluid in his motions. Dante craned his neck to look at her. She was looking right into his eyes, and somehow he could feel her assessing him. You haven't even seen me fight, he countered. You got quite the way with words, though. Aaron shrugged noncommittally. Doesn't matter. Your feet always find perfect purchase wherever you step. The level of comfort you have with wearing your sword belies your fighting spirit. Dante was rather amused by her assessment of him. He had always prided himself in his capability as a fighter, but had never thought himself to be the best. You can tell all that just by watching me walk. Aaron nodded. I'm observant. Plus, I've been all over these parts gathering herbs for my grandfather, so I watched you rather than take in the same old boring scenery. Grandfather was right when he told me about you. Dante looked back to the stars, unsure of what to say. In just hours of knowing him, Aaron had summed up the majority of who he was. The thought brought a pang of unhappiness to him. Was that all he was? Was he only a fighter? Was he only good for killing? Reflecting on his past, Dante realized that all he had ever really done was fight and kill and travel. He was very good at fighting and killing. Perhaps he could use this trip to expand on what he could do. Maybe he could seek out someone to settle down with and have a few children. He knew of a way to extend the youth of a human, so falling in love wasn't as painful a thing as it could have been. Another thought came to him then. How was it he had never fallen in love before? He had met many beautiful women in his life, and had even bedded a few of them, but he felt as if he never actually loved anyone. Then his mind wandered through the ages, back to the city of Eastros. He thought of Stacy, the young woman he had killed in order to come back home. A wave of guilt washed over him, and he had to physically shake the thought from his mind. No use worrying about the past. A light snore brought Dante out of his contemplations, and he realized he'd been deep in thought for a long while. Aaron lay on her side, asleep and curled up near the fire. Dante shook his head and smiled. Perhaps with her help during their travels, he could find the man beneath the warrior. And that, my friends, is chapter 13 of The Demon. I hope you enjoyed it, and have a wonderful day.